All right, so I'm going to talk to you today about what city data would look like if it was simpler. So like Greg said, mine is not moving forward. All right. So like Greg said, my name is Cameron Carlisle. I'm a software developer with the city of Asheville. Well, at least for the next week or so, I'm actually moving to Salt Lake City next Saturday. So the abstract that I submitted for this talk was intended for a longer session, and so since I only have 10 minutes, I'm going to try to focus on what I think are the two most important aspects of creating information products that people will actually use. And they are, number one, get to know your users, and number two, let usability drive the development process. Sorry, this is really weird. And so these are lessons that I've learned while working at the city of Asheville as a developer, building an app called Simplicity. It is an app that actually I built with Dave when Dave worked for the city. And it's an app that helps citizens and city employees answer questions using city data in a simpler way. And I'll put the link to the app up at the end of the presentation. But before we get started with getting to know your users, I bet that we have some awesome geographers in the room right now that can help me answer a question. And that question is, so what types of crimes have occurred near my house in the past month? And in this scenario, you have access to an address point layer with some attribute information about that address and a crime point layer with some attributes about the crime, such as the type of crime and the date it occurred. So using your GIS skills, how would you answer that question? And you can just shout stuff out if you, nobody? So you do a buffer around the address, right? And then what else? Anything? Come on, guys, wake up a little bit. Okay, yeah, so you would start with the address layer, and then you would do some sort of spatial selection around an address point that you're interested in, right, at a certain radius, and select those crime points, and then maybe open up the attribute table for those crime points that you have selected, and scroll over till you get to the offense type field, and look at the different offense types that have happened, and then maybe sort that by a date range, right? So it's not too surprising that like a room full of geographers would be able to answer a question like that, given some points, lines, and polygons. And because you're used to working with GIS, you know how to work with points, lines, and polygons, right? God, this is like really hard because I don't have like my notes. Okay, so what does this have to do with getting to know your users? Sorry, guys. Why is this not? Yeah, but then it's like not showing the notes like while I do it. Oh, it's fine. I can keep going. Okay. Oh, you don't do the slides. Yeah. All right. So what does this have to do with getting to know your users? Well, if we were designing an app that would be where the target audience would be exclusively geographers that are proficient in GIS, then we'd probably design some sort of web map, right, that had a bunch of vector layers on it, like points, lines, and polygons, and probably some geoprocessing tools, like some buffer tools or some spatial selection tools. And you guys, as geographers, could go to town and answer the question that I just asked and probably a bunch of other questions. But what if we knew that our target audience wasn't exclusively geographers? What if it was made up instead of grandmothers and college students and concerned citizens and real estate agents and activists and city employees? And it's not saying that any of these people can't do GIS, but the chances that they're all experts in GIS is probably slim to none, right? And so the question is whether or not there is a better way to do this. And I think there actually probably is a better way. So if we go back to that same question that we asked, and that's what types of crimes have occurred near my house in the past month. what type of information or what input do you actually need from the user to actually answer that question? Right, all you actually need from the user is the actual address, right? All right, and you also probably need to know the fact that they're actually interested in looking at crime data. So I can imagine an interface for this, which would just be something as simple as a text input field where the user types in their address, and then it just shows them the crimes that are near their address that have happened recently, right? And you probably actually don't need a map to actually do this, right? You might want to show them a map. You might give them some context about the crimes that have actually happened. But they actually don't need to use the map as a tool to answer the question. And the key point that I'm trying to get across here is that you can shift the requisite expertise away from the user having to be the expert on how to do GIS and shift that actually into the application code so that the user doesn't need to be a trained geographer. And instead, you can let the app take care of the complicated bits. Right, we're still doing GIS. When the user types into their address into the search bar, we still have to geocode that address. We still have to calculate the radius. We still have to spatially select the crimes within that radius that have happened in the last month. But the interface doesn't have to be really GIS-y, right? But the user interface does need to be. Why does that keep happening? But the user interface does need to be simple, and simple is kind of a relative term. And so like if we were building an app that was exclusively for geographers, the map would be a really, really simple interface for them to use. But if we were building an app for the general public, then a map might not be the best interface for them to use. Maybe something just like as simple as a search bar. I mean, everybody knows how to use Google. And if we can get the answer without using a map, then it doesn't seem like, maybe it's not a good idea to complicate things by actually introducing a map into the interface. So always be thinking about the user, whoever they are, and make things as simple as possible. And this is much easier to do if you're doing custom development. It gets a lot harder or near impossible if you're working with enterprise applications or any kind of canned apps where you have limited control over the interface, right? So how do you actually get to know your users? God, this is super annoying. Well, it turns out it's actually really, really hard to get to know your users. And oftentimes the best thing you can do is just guess, at least initially, until you can get some sort of analytics on who's actually using your site. And I don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm going to keep going and go on to the next phase of this, and that's or the next aspect of creating information products that people actually want to use. And that's letting usability drive the development process. So is anybody familiar with Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup? Anybody? Okay, one person. All right. So in that book, Ries introduced the idea of building software as an iterative process in which you build something very quickly called your MVP, and then you measure how well that performs, and then you kind of learn from your mistakes, and then you start the process over and over again, right? So at first, you will build something, you'll come up with an idea, you'll build something, it'll be your MVP. And for those that don't know what that is, that's kind of like a barely working, only maybe part of your app, minimum prototype that you could actually take out and test. And then you'll do some sort of measurement on that, and you'll collect some data, and then you'll learn from any of the mistakes that you're made in that process. And then you'll just keep doing that over and over again. So you'll come up with an idea, build something, measure it, learn from it, and you just keep going, and eventually you end up with a really good product. But where this gets really, really interesting is when you introduce users into the situation, or into this cycle, and turn that measure step into usability tests. And so what do I mean by usability tests? Well, they're actually kind of self-explanatory. It's where you test the usability of your app, and you bring users in and actually have them try to actually use your app. And what we found while working at the city of Asheville is that we really only needed 3 users. They don't have to be something very, very formal. Dave and I would actually go out and go just like to a coffee shop and bribe people with pastries to come and try our app for a few minutes. And we found that after 3 users, we were coming up with the same bugs over and over again. And that after that, it was just the effectiveness kind of wore off. So to do a usability test, you really just need to sit your users down in front of your app and give them some sort of objective. Where is the cursor? Some sort of objective or some sort of question to answer, and you're just going to watch them and ask them to answer that question and use your app to answer that question. And it's really important that you let them know that this is not a test, that you're not actually testing them, that you're testing your application. Because a lot of people will get really, really nervous and be like, I'm not like a really techie person. I'm going to make mistakes, and you have to just encourage them and let them know that that's what we want. We want you to make mistakes. We want to figure out where our app is not usable, right? And then you just need to sit back and watch and try really, 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 really hard not to help them. It's really, really hard as a developer when you know exactly where that button is that you placed on the screen and they're trying super, super, super hard to like find out what to do next in your app. You just got to sit there and be quiet and not help them. But I mean, if they get really, really frustrated, you can help them a little bit. But you do want to ask them questions, right? You want to try to get them talking as they're walking through and negotiating your app. You want to ask them questions like, why did you just click on this? Or if they're hesitating, why are you hesitating? And just kind of get them talking and speaking out loud as they do different things in your app. And I guarantee that you will be amazed if you do usability tests. You as a developer are too close to your app to actually know whether or not it's usable or not. And the only people that can tell you if it's usable or not are your actual users. And so the best way to get them to tell you if your app works is to go meet with them and do usability tests with them. All right, and that's, I think, all the time that I have. Probably over, but yeah, any questions or anything?
Thanks, Cameron.
And that's the address for Simplicity right there.
Okay, so I'm going to ask all the speakers to come up front, and like I said at the beginning, we're just going to have we got about 15 minutes or so for questions for any of the speakers. How about it?
Question for the disaster management. Do you recommend getting web apps and those websites started, say before like a disaster strikes or something? Like when we get into hurricane season or
Yep.
hurricane season?
So yeah, for certain disaster categories, for instance, wildland fire, there's a National Wildland Fire Coordinating Group, and there's a org specifically for it. We've got everything pre-configured. All the layers are loaded, all the maps are loaded, all apps are loaded, everything is ready to roll. So really all you're doing is spinning up user accounts if somebody doesn't already have one. So something similar to that would probably have a lot of value. Hurricanes are coming around less often than wildfires, but yeah, the more that you can pre-stage those resources, the easier it is to get going. Yeah.
Question in the back?
Yes, for Alice. When you did your application, did you look at properties that were in, I use the wrong word here, arrears, taxes, or and any, did you see anything visually sort of aggregate where the properties that might have been individually not mentioned also became any kind of mass?
So all these properties that we have on the site are our properties. So we either own them ourselves or we own them jointly with the county. A lot of them are foreclosed. If we own them with the county, generally they're foreclosed properties, and they've just been sitting vacant. If the house becomes inhabitable or dangerous, then we tend to tear the building down, and then they're just vacant lots. But we own or we co-own all these sites. But we have them on the map, so again, with the Choice Neighborhood Plan, it kind of helps to encourage development like the Habitat folks. And we have some other people that are looking at, combining several lots that are close together and doing a project.
Hey guys, two questions for two guys from Asheville. I'm Reed, I'm here with my team, Gary Government. So we want to foster a
So I'll attempt to answer that. Other than us, no one would take us up on that, really. And that might be because of fear factors. The only thing that I would suggest doing is to continue to try to do those things and continue to come to conferences like this and show how easy it is to use GitHub. And hopefully 1 or 2 people in the room will actually try that. And if you don't know what we're talking about, Lean Startup, I would say go read the book, and it'll change the way you think about everything. I don't know if that answers your question. There's other things I've done when avoiding IT stuff. When it does take forever to spin up a server, what I've done is told other departments, you have a procurement card, I'll get you an Amazon AMI for Esri, and just use your procurement card to test out your idea. It might cost you $4 and you can test it out, and you don't need any of us to do that. Yeah. And that's worked, and it's powerful because when you bring it back to IT and you say, hey, these guys are calling up and waiting for a month to spin up a server is too long. Well, for $3, they just did it and they didn't need you.
And just one follow-on point with that. I think the more you talk about it in kind of evangelizing it to other departments, it does eventually start to rub off, because we just launched a new website at the city of Asheville a couple weeks ago. Not a very smooth process, but it was our communications department actually brought up the idea, hey, we need to do usability testing on this website before we launch it. I mean, we probably should have done it way earlier in the process than 2 weeks before the actual website launch, but people are suggesting it in other departments. So I think it's just keep talking about it and inviting people from around your organization to come participate in usability testing. I think is a good way for them to see kind of the magic, because unless you've actually really seen somebody do it, you might be kind of skeptical as to how amazing it actually is. So. Yep.
Other questions?
I'm kind of curious if, this is application, is there any kind of tool that you're getting to find some sort of paper output for your application? I noticed the Newburgh presentation had a PDF kind of download, but I didn't see it at least mentioned in other ones that people are actually asking for any kind of hard copy output from what you guys are working on.
Somebody want to?
I'll address it for what it's worth. Mine is, most people that I've worked with, they're wanting a map from the web app builder. The print tool from Esri is hit or miss. There's actually a really good app on there that's just technically no longer supported by the person that developed it, but we've taken the code and ran with it, and it's a custom widget. It actually gives you previews on the screen of your what your map output's going to be. It gives you a nice red border. If it's 11 by 17, 24 by 36, portrait landscape, it changes. You can get your map to fit just in there how you want it, set the scale, print out, and it's going to look just like that. Kind of what you see is what you get, print out, and it actually works, and has worked fairly well. That's, for what it's worth, that's what we've used, and that's what a lot of clients have used, but that's what they've asked for, is to use that for exhibit purposes.